2015. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Sobroff, Madison, Figueroa Villa, and Saltzman are present, and we have a quorum. Number one on the agenda, Commission comments, Mr. President.
Commission comments? Nope.
Number two on the agenda, the report of the Chief of Police, Chief Beck.
Morning, Chief.
Good morning, Commissioners. This weekend I attended the 31st annual Baker to Vegas race. For those of you that don't know, Baker to Vegas is a cross-country relay that covers 120 miles with 20-person teams. Obviously, the average leg is about 6 miles. This is the largest law enforcement athletic event in the world. There were 262 teams. If you do the math, that's about 6,000 competitors. LAPD fielded over 30 teams. The number one finisher for the fourth year in a row was LAPD's elite team. The first, there you go. The women's there are a number of women's teams. Our women's team won for the fifth year in a row by over an hour. They are truly a dynasty. This team will never be beat. They have various categories of teams. One of the categories is the station category, and that's a very competitive category because any station or agency with under 500 employees can enter, and that category was won by Southeast. So that was really an amazing feat. The headquarters team, which is employees that work out of this building, was generous enough to let me run for them. They did very well. Thank you to Commander Smith for being fast enough that they could accept my slow time. So I appreciate that. Great event. We had over 1,000 members of the Los Angeles Police Department there. It is not only a team building exercise, but it's also a testament to the fitness of this organization. You know, we have a number of conversations about employee wellness and injured on duty status and things like that. But when you look at something like this, you realize what the Los Angeles Police Department is about, and part of that is about physical fitness. So I was very proud of the organization, as I always am. On to discussion of crime. We have had 3.6% less homicides this year than last, and 17% less homicides than 2013. If you remember right, 2013 was our lowest year in over 40 years. So we're on track to have a decrease for homicides, although it's still early in the year. We've seen a general increase in violent crime. Violent crime has increased by 28%. Property crime, we've seen a general increase in property crime of 12%, although we do have a reduction in general personal other thefts. Total Part 1 crime picture, 15.2% increase compared to last year, about 8% compared to 13, and it's about even compared to 12. Gang-related crime is also up, although gang homicides are down. The primary crime that is up with gangs is gang shootings. We've had a tremendous increase in gang shootings over the last 3 months. Our Office of Operations is working diligently to address that with the partnership of the GRID office and our prevention pieces. Traffic collisions. Overall traffic collisions are up, although serious traffic collisions are down. Overall traffic collisions are up about 10%, but serious collisions, those that are fatal and require hospitalization, are down about 14%. Motor vehicle versus pedestrians, which is something we've been working on, are down 5.6%, and serious motor vehicle versus pedestrian accidents are down 12.5%. Hit and runs, we've seen an increase in hit and runs this year of 8%, and serious hit and runs are also up by 25%, but that's only 9 collisions. So we are working diligently on those things. Personnel strength. We have, let me do my math real quick here, 9,895 sworn personnel, 2,720 civilian personnel with 557 vacancies. We have just under 400 reserve officers, 373 specialist volunteers, 62 chaplains, and 6,081 cadets. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, we do have 3 public comment cards. We have Mr. Herman, Prentice Jenkins, and Mr. Ted Hayes.
Mr. Hayes, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't want you to think I've caught the contagion of the dog and pony show, but I must do this because I've been so much involved in trying to keep our method of getting in here orderly. Now, last week, we could not bring in liquid, so they took my mouthwash. We couldn't bring in perishables, so they took my donuts and milk. Now, is this the gel, or is this your... Well, anyway, I don't believe these things are necessary, but is the fear level or the threat level so high that these things must be confiscated? Where's the airline I'm getting on with these things? So there's a binder out there that tells each officer how to conduct their business at that front desk. If they would bother to read it, they'd know what their duties are. But that goes back to training, doesn't it? Go back to training. Does training matter if the officers won't pay attention, won't open the binder and find out how they conduct the business out there? A woman left her purse in her chair when she came here to speak. It was confiscated and taken out there. And she ran out to get it, blah, blah. I don't know whether that's necessary. But if the threat level or the fear level is that high, so be it. Now, I mentioned some time ago about trains and people being killed by them. And I said, I don't know what the component of public safety means to the LAPD. But I think that's an aspect of public safety. I know the sheriff investigates all these accidents, but they're unnecessary because the politicians are killing us. They say it's too expensive to build a train under the ground and too expensive to have crossings that are safe. So we'll pay, taxpayers will pay for the recent accident on the Expo line, and no one will do anything about it.
Morning, sir.
Good morning. In terms of significant incidents, the reason we're having significant incidents is because of police and firemen suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Mental illness is the reason we're having these significant incidents. Unarmed people being shot to death. Why? Because we got mentally ill cops and mentally ill firemen, fire trucks running into each other in Monterey Park. No one knows the answer. I know the answer. Mental illness, drug addiction, also cops fighting with their wives and bringing that stuff to work. You know, he's ready to, what he says, shoot that bitch to death because she's taking all his money and divorcing him and taking the kids. Guess what? That man's on the edge and somebody gave him a badge and gun and said, go police the streets. Can you imagine what happens if that were you? On your worst day, when you were maddest at the person that you hated the most, and somebody gave you a badge and a gun or put you in a fire truck, of course you're going to run into another fire truck and sever a man's leg. And what was the investigation? Oh, we didn't find any drugs. We didn't find anything on it. The cops didn't do any blood test on them crazy firemen. Firemen are crazy. I have a document here. This was written by other firemen telling you how crazy firemen are. He knows how crazy they are. He knows how crazy some of his cops are. But he can't do anything about it. Because the reality is if you took away all the cops who are on antipsychotic drugs, because, yeah, they're taking antipsychotics and antidepressants, cops and firemen, they have to. You see all that blood, you're going to have, they're in the blood up to here and brains and stuff. And guess what? He knows they're taking. He can't do anything about it. If you took all the cops and firemen off the street who are on antidepressants, on drugs, you wouldn't have any firemen or police.
Thank you.
Mr. Herman?
Good morning, Chief Beck. And we all know that the fatalities in the city of Los Angeles is just not a speculation. It's a reality. And so the war on crime still does not prevail. The victims are your innocent citizens by hit and runs, the Da Vinci fires, which is under investigation, and now the transparency of someone who did it. And then we have other matters of public interest when it comes to dealing with the war on crime. How do we deal with war on crime? Well, there's a conflict of interest, Mr. Beck, at City Hall, and it's called disaster recovery from Councilman Michael Englander for disrupting public meetings not in favor of public concern. How unreasonable it is to deny us, the public, we the people, your confidant of death, to understand that what does equal access mean, as brought out by the fine African-American gentleman who well put it in his
Mr.
words.
Herman,
Stay on topic, will you, pal?
I'm sorry, that wasn't a crime, but it is, in other words, a cycle of crime, of white collar, to prevent us from saying that no one's life matters in Los Angeles. And if it does, Mr. Sobroff, what are you doing as a commissioner to prevent further injury to the public? Police brutality, Africa. Good examples of death in our community. So again, when you invite us to a meeting in our communities throughout the city of Los Angeles, remind the officers that we have rights, that we don't have to be searched. There's nothing to hide.
Okay.
Thank you. Item number 3, the report of the Executive Director, Mr. Tiefeng.
No report today, Mr. President.
Thank you. We do have one comment card. We have Mr. Herman.
Good morning again. And regarding Mr. Tiefeng's, are we on that subject, Mr. City Attorney?
we are, but just repeating what's on the agenda doesn't make it relevant.
Thank you. So, Mr. Tiefeng, the calendar of all the events that you've basically made open for us, public interest, public concern, again, over and over, your love for the public shows when you take it into our communities and share with the public what our concerns and interests are. And I admire that, although today I represent death, crime, and so forth. But continue the work, help us to endure the unreasonable, unfair treatment, unconstitutional civil rights violations by the city of Los Angeles as you and I partake in the public safety meetings, and you've seen the discussions between I and Mr. Big Ears, Mitch Englander, who says that it's irrelevant, not important, that I mention how the calendar dates have to fall and not be postponed or canceled. And you do an effective job at keeping us on the calendar at City Hall. So remind the commissioners, Mr. Tiefeng, how we, the public, all of you, the public, should be involved in the concerns of that calendar so that no matter what part of town we're in, El Sereno, Lincoln Heights, Boyle Heights, hoorah to my friends out there. Mr. Tiefeng does an excellent job. In all due respect, thank you. You can keep your 11 seconds, Mr. City Attorney. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 4 on the agenda, the report of the Inspector General, Mr. Bustamante.
I have nothing, Commissioners.
Thank you. We do have 2 public comment cards. We have Mr. Herman and Prentice Jenkins.
Good morning. And I'd like to bring to the attention of the Inspector General, and hopefully this goes out to the Attorney General, that there's been some civil rights violations at City Hall where Michael Hunt, again, Michael Hunt from Venice Beach, was harassed by the Sergeant at Arms at City Hall Council meetings as he was threatened to be thrown out and surrounded by LAPD officers. I have it on video, I have it on tape, and we filed a complaint of harassment. to individuals who are simply there for a meeting. Here's one of the videos. But you can pull up the archives at lacity.org, Mr. Inspector General. And again, hopefully you will defend the rights of every individual despite their performance, their disability, but I'm talking in regards to access to public meetings, First Amendment right, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And now we have Walker versus Texas over a license plate. And Honorable Judge Roberts and the judges will come up with a resolution for that. So as you see in my decorative attire, this is just my uniform. So I say to you, when you visit City Hall, on our behalf, Mr. City Inspector for the City of Los Angeles, Mr. Bustamante, hold them accountable for their actions towards us, the public, for the Brown Act violations against Michael Hunt and now I, Armando Herman, for the record. Violations of harassment, retaliation for this. Thank you.
Next.
Prentice Jenkins.
I'd like to talk about the mental illness in the police and fire department.
You
And
need to stay on topic. This is regarding the Inspector General.
yeah, it says here significant incidents, right? Those are significant incidents. They're mental illness, killing people, shooting homeless people. I have a video right here of a cop. It's not an LAPD cop, but this is going on all across the country, grabbing a black man's penis, saying it's a search. But it's clearly not a search. And after he grabs it, the young brother knows this ain't no search no more. This is a homosexual cop grabbing his genitals and going back to the station, talking to the other gay cops. These cops know which cops are gay and which cops go grabbing
Does this
black
have
men's
anything
penises.
to do with the Inspector General?
This
Stay
is-
on topic,
this is
sir.
Sir, this is. You may not like what you're hearing,
Wait a minute.
but this
If
is
you're
about
not on
significant-
topic, I'm going to stop you. So hold on.
This is about
Is he on
significant
topic?
incidents.
Sir,
This
you
is
have-
a significant
no,
incident.
Not here. It's not right.
Yeah, right
No,
here,
You're
right
talking
here.
about an incident that happened in Milwaukee.
I'm talking.
You do
I'm
that
talking
all
about
the time.
gay cops who
Right.
follow black men.
You've said it
put 'em
every
up
week
against-
for the last month, so we've heard it.
Yeah, but are you doing anything about it? That's the
It's
question.
not on topic.
Yeah, but
And
there
so you can
go.
come back
that's
during-
not. You're saying that's not on topic, sir.
Come back during public
Significant
comment.
incidents. See,
Sick of
you're
this
taking up my time. That's significant incident that happened on Skid Row. As I told you, that happened on Skid Row. It would not have been a significant incident had the cops not shown up. It would have resolved itself. But when the cops showed up, a man is dead. That's the significant incident. And when you say you're off topic on significant incidents like that, that lets me know none of you are investigating this stuff. You're whitewashing this stuff on gay cops and gay firemen. This is a gay cop, gay fireman hitting your window with their floodlights because they're in love with you. Y'all don't believe they're gay cops. They know it is. Every one of these guys in blue with a badge know they're gay cops, and they know which ones they are.
You're done.
Thank you. Item number 5 consists of information items and filed items relative to noise variances and special event permits submitted for the period ending March 27, 2015. Item number 6, presentations. Do we have any presentations this morning?
Yes, Mr. President, members of the commission, you have a presentation for Assistant Chief of Police Sandy Jo MacArthur, who is
Right.
retiring. Mr. President.
Sandy Jo, will you please come up here with us? There she is. Chief? Nobody wants to do this. Nobody. Do we have to do this?
Sorry. You don't have to read it. Yeah, you do. No, you don't. Yeah, you have to.
I'm going to.
Good.
Members of Los Angeles Police Commission congratulate you upon your retirement from the Los Angeles Police Department after 35 dedicated years. You joined the department in 1980 and have worked numerous assignments from the rank of police officer all the way to assistant chief. You began your career in patrol, vice, and special problems unit assignments. Your administrative assignments include service in training, ombuds, press relations, and as an adjunct, is that the way I pronounce that?
Adjutant.
An adjutant?
I've got better eyes, I guess.
To Chief William Bratton. After being promoted to captain and assigned to Civil Rights Integrity Division, you're responsible for overseeing implementation of all federal consent decree requirements. In this position, you played a significant role in achieving substantial compliance with the federal consent decree entered into in between the City of Los Angeles and the United States Department of Justice. As a result of collaboration with key internal and external partners, the consent decree was lifted in July 2009. I note that Jerry Chaliff is here, who worked with you day and night, day and night, day and night
My
to
partner.
get that done. You might join us up here too, Jerry. Recognized for your leadership skills and management abilities, you have repeatedly been selected to implement and oversee significant operational programs. As a result of the attacks on September 11, 2001, and the Mumbai, India massacre tragedy in 2008, you developed a comprehensive tactical strategy that integrates and aligns both strategic and tactical responses by local, state, and federal agencies. You continue to foster efforts to engage local communities by building collaborative partnerships and educating department personnel. Most noteworthy, you have led challenging LAPD initiatives, including the MacArthur Park investigation. Is that park named after you?
No.
The 21st, I knew that. I was a Parks Commissioner. Give me a break. 21st Century Mobile Field Force Training, the multi-assault counterterrorism, action capabilities, regional training, and the redesign of the entire recruitment training program. We wish you all the best in your retirement and future endeavors, and we thank you for your outstanding contribution to the City of Los Angeles.
Thank you.
Motion. Chief? Chief, you want to take the mic?
Sure.
Jerry, also, I'd like you to say a couple words, okay? What you doing? My part.
So Sandy Joe joined the Los Angeles Police Department when there were very, very few women that worked patrol, and the organization has changed dramatically since then. And due to pioneers like her, this is a place that I can be proud to have my daughter work. And I think that may be, in spite of all the many accolades that the commissioner read there, I think that may be the lasting gift of not only you but of your generation, to be those that broke through the ceiling, made the inroads into policing, and changed this organization for the better and forever. So thank you, Sandy Joe.
Jerry, was your
Unaccustomed.
24/7 consent decree former president of the Los Angeles Police Commission?
Yeah, but we didn't have this fancy stuff when I did it. Let me just say a few words. I think there isn't anybody that I can think of that when you ask them what one word comes to your mind about a person other than Sandy Jo, the word's incredible. She's an incredible person who's achieved an incredible amount in this department. As I travel around the country now and working with other police departments, it's really clear to me that this is the best police department in this country, if not the world. And a lot of that credit goes to Sandy Jo MacArthur. So join me in retirement and we'll just have a good time. Thank you.
Wait a minute. 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Start the clock.
On topic.
On topic. When I look back at my career, I feel so very fortunate to work with and for so many people in this room, including the citizens that come every week. Some of us, we forge friendships, and some, I might not miss some of the comments, but it has made this department a much better place. And all I can say is every day has been a gift. And some gifts were hard to figure out in the beginning, but in the end I figured it out. And I am leaving this department a better person because of everybody and all of my experiences. And I hope I left it a little bit better than the way I found it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. We're now on item number 7, consent agenda items. These items are considered to be routine and non-controversial, upon which the board is provided with adequate information for approval without inquiry or discussion. We do have a comment card on 7A and 7B. Would a commissioner wish to pull any item as special?
Move approval of item 7C.
With thanks to the donor. I second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We have Wayne Spindler on 7A.
Morning, sir.
Good morning. Yeah, 7A is very, very important because the thing that we need the most is to give travel authority to people working for our city. They're underpaid, they don't make enough. They're just making barely the minimum wage. And this long trip from Baker to Las Vegas is just, it requires funding. So how much are we going to give in this travel authority? Does it include hotel accommodations? And also it has to include gambling chips because you have to go to the tables. That's very important for this police department to be doing, because all those tickets that they're writing on all of these streets and these ticket traps, you're getting a lot of extra money. So I propose that you should give $1 million on 7A and just hold a lottery and take the first 100 cops out of a hat and give them each chips. Just pay them in chips. Because if you're going to do this frivolousness, then you might as well go totally frivolous, right? I mean, there's no point to having a board and consent items, and it says it's not controversial. And of course, giving additional perks without the expenditure written on the agenda is not controversial, because none of you know exactly how much this is going to be. You don't care. And nobody even looks. So congratulations and have a good time. I was in Vegas. It's a wonderful city.
There are no other comment cards on this item.
Move approval of item 7A.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have a comment card on 7B, Wayne Spindler.
Oh boy. $500 free color printer. Well, have you been to the stores lately? Go to Office Depot, which is now Staples. You're going to have a hard time finding a $500 color printer. They're usually like $30. So, do we have somebody here taking a $500 credit for a tax donation of $500 on a printer he bought for $30? I don't know. Why is this on the agenda? Just when you want to donate something to the police, just put it in a box and leave it out in the street. Oh, wait a minute, we can't do that because it's called a bomb squad, and that would be like tens of thousands of dollars. They'd have to shut the whole city down. Forgive me. So, where's the printer? It should be sitting here. We should admire it. And of course, it's worth $500, right? When you could buy it for $50 at your local store, right? So, who's going to use this printer here? Is it going to be here and why does a department with $1 billion budget need a $500 color printer? So, maybe you're bankrupt. Is that what it is? There could be a bankruptcy coming here. So let's see the printer. Is it an inkjet printer? Is it a color toner printer? And was it bought at Staples for $30 and you're giving them credit for $500? Nobody wants to talk about that. Thank you.
There are no other comment cards on this item.
I'll move approval with thanks to the donor.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We're now on regular agenda items. Number 8. 8A, B, and C are verbal presentations. Would a commissioner wish to pull an item as special for discussion 8D through K? We do have a comment card on 8D and 8K.
And Commissioners, 8D will be continued 2 weeks till April 14th due to the unavailability of department staff. So
8D is, we're not doing that today?
That's correct. You do have a speaker card on file. I'll turn it to the city attorney to see if you have to take the speaker card since you're not going to consider the item.
And I'm sorry, there was a comment card on what other item?
8D and 8K.
I would like to hold for discussion items 8F and 8K, and A, B, and C are verbal. I will move approval of E, G, H, I, and J.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We'll begin.
Second? Wait, I'm sorry, second? We need a second. I'll second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So let's do the presentations.
Okay, we'll begin with 8A, Department's verbal presentation and discussion relative to the progress of the review of the Training, Evaluation, and Management System 2, Teams 2.
Welcome. Morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Maggie Goodrich, CIO. I'm joined here by Dr. Craig Uchida of Justice and Security Strategies. While we were under the consent decree, we had very specific requirements in terms of how Teams 2, the early intervention system, would be designed and function, and all of that was agreed to between the city, the DOJ, and the monitor. When the consent decree was ultimately terminated by the court, I started having conversations with Dr. Uchida about the need to take a look at the functionality of Teams 2 and do an analysis of the impact and effect it's actually had on performance across the board for the department. Wanting to look at things like, did we get the peer groups right? Did we get the thresholds right? Are we looking at the right data sets? And so when a grant opportunity came out from the National Institute of Justice, which is the research arm for the DOJ, Dr. Uchida and I agreed that we should apply for that to see if we could get funding to actually study the impact of Teams 2 and hopefully have Dr. Uchida come up with some recommendations on potential modifications to the system that might improve it overall. It was designed close to 13, 14 years ago now, based on what was known then. It was an early entry into the early intervention system world, really. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Uchida. He'll tell you a little bit about himself and what he's going to do under this grant.
Good morning. Thank
Morning,
you.
sir.
Thank you for letting me speak today. What I want to do is just give you a quick overview of what we're doing, who we are, what we're doing, and what we hope to achieve. I'll also give you a timeline as to when to expect reports and such as well. Basically, my company was founded in 1997. We're a research think tank for law enforcement and criminal justice agencies. We've done a lot of work over the last, 18 years now with respect to evaluations, research projects, training, and technical assistance issues. I'm a criminologist. I have a PhD in criminal justice and criminology from the University at Albany. I am a Californian, however. I did go to school at UC San Diego and grew up in Pasadena. And I was an executive at the COPS office back in the day when we first started the office in 1994. I'm assisted by Shelley Solomon, who's an economist, and also Dr. Mark Swat, who's a research statistician. As Maggie mentioned, LAPD asked for an evaluation of Teams 2. We applied for funding, and we were fortunate enough to get funding on the second round. This is an 18-month project. We will provide ongoing reports and updates on what we're doing. We will have a final report that includes results and recommendations. As you know, Teams 2 is an early intervention system, and it's designed to identify and intervene with officers at risk for future misconduct. These types of systems are exist throughout police departments across the country. There's another study being done on those systems as well. So I think the timing of both of our studies will show both the national look at EIs and a very specific one here. So we're asking a number of questions, primarily with respect to whether it does what it's supposed to do. Does it collect appropriate and meaningful information? Does it identify at-risk behavior? Does it allow for appropriate interventions? And what are the strengths and limitations of the system? What should be changed and what should be improved? And I think that's something that I know the department is looking very closely at and very concerned about, and that's one of the things we're going to be looking at as well. As you know, Teams 2 looks at 5 important domains: use of force, citizen complaints, claims and lawsuits, preventable vehicle collisions, vehicle pursuits, and it also generates action items. So what are we going to do? What are we specifically looking at here? We're going to do some time series and look at the number of incidents that have occurred over time. We want to know who's been involved in those incidents and what's gone on. Have those incidents changed over time? And are those changes attributable to Teams 2? So, for example, we want to look at use of force, and we'll look at use of force over the last 15 years. Has Teams 2 reduced the use of force? Has it reduced civilian complaints and other types of domains? One of the things, too, is that we want to know, really, if Teams 2 has captured all of the necessary information to appropriately track at-risk behavior. So we want to look beyond what's in there, look at other systems as well, and ask other questions about what could be involved or what should be involved. We also know that immediate supervisors use their judgment to review action items. And the big question there is, what standards do they use and how effective is their review? What are the costs of Teams 2 to the LAPD? We've heard that and learned that supervisors take a lot of time looking at action items. What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of their time and energy and the cost to their work and so forth? Does it affect officer morale? Does it affect their creativity and initiative? So what are we going to do, and what have we done so far? We've looked at how Teams 2 was built. I've gone through personally a number of large binders and talked with as many people as I could about how this was built. It's a very comprehensive system, I will say that, and it has a lot of data. There is an incredible amount of data in here that is extremely worthwhile, not only to look at uses of force, but also police personnel. So we have obtained a data extraction. I will say that the data extraction is ginormous, and there's at least 39 million lines of data that we're looking at right now. We didn't anticipate that. We thought it was going to be a smaller data set than it is, and that's one of the reasons it's taking longer than we thought it would do. We want to replicate what LAPD's looked at in terms of their information. So basically, look at a data validation of use of force and other domains. We will be using different statistical techniques, time series, regression discontinuity, other types of statistical methods. We will be doing surveys of officers, both those who have generated Teams 2 action items, those who have not. We also want to do a survey of line supervisors, and we will also do in-depth interviews with line supervisors, again, to determine what the cost is to their time and so forth. There are a number of items of interest here that we've heard and we've read about and are looking at. Peer groups are one where officers are compared against each other's group. Right now there are about 32 peer groups. We want to know whether those peer groups are relevant, whether they should be changed. We also want to look at whether we should change the domains and the thresholds. How do we measure system effectiveness? And we will examine the dispositions of AIs and their meaning. We will also look at how the department allocates its resources to Teams 2 and what the costs are for doing that. Other factors that we're asking are the at-risk incidents attributable to changes in personnel. That is, do years of experience, did time at a certain division make a difference? Did changes in training make a difference? Are there other identifiable characteristics of officers that were previously involved in at-risk incidents, and how do we account for those in all of this? And then what are other factors that may influence at-risk incidents? Is it the geographic location? Is it the division they're working in, and so forth? Brief timeline, we started this back in July. We started collecting background information over the summer. We had a blip. One of the things that is required by the Justice Department is a research review board that looks at human subjects. And so we had to convene an institutional review board. That took longer than we thought. But again, we got approval. We are protecting the confidentiality and the anonymity of all of the officers that we are looking at. That's a very, very important consideration here because these are very, very confidential data. None of those data will be released to anyone. We are keeping a close hold on all that information, and I think for very, very important reasons. We started looking at the data. We're going to begin our surveys this month or next month, April. We're going to provide preliminary findings about our data, about what we're looking at towards the middle of June. During the summer, we'll be writing a report. We'll be giving those drafts to NIJ and LAPD for review. And then from October to December of this year, we'll finish up and revise and provide that complete report to the department.
Good.
That's it.
Questions?
I have a question. I'm sorry, you may have said it, but can you just, again, what time span are you looking at in terms of the amount, the occurrence of the events?
Well, for Teams 2 goes back to 2007. We're going to look at least to 2000 in terms of the information. So that goes back at least 15 years of information on uses of force. The data allow us to look at monthly DP. I mean, there's lots of ways we can cut the data and examine it.
And you mentioned a couple of times the cost of the supervisor's attention. So how will that stack up vis-a-vis the quality of the intervention? Meaning that I guess I certainly get why there would be a look at how much does the time cost. Are you also going to look at if it's a cost well spent?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think looking at what they've done, how they do it, what the results are certainly an important part of this, yes.
So that will then be limited to supervisors?
Yes.
And then I think my final question is, when you collect all the data, are you also going to analyze it for demographics?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you mention that, or did I just miss it?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, I did not.
I have a particular interest in demographics, and to the extent that we're able to take a look at populations and behaviors of populations.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're, I don't know
Yes.
if it's all designed, but just know that when the time comes, I'm going to ask about
Okay.
it.
All right. I will be prepared, yes.
Thank you.
At the end of the day, will it come back to us, the report, or it goes to the department?
It will ultimately come to you, yes.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yes.
So it'll be made public.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's just a presentation. There's no
That's
action required.
Okay, we're now on item 8B, Department's verbal presentation and discussion relative to the status of the implementation of the digital in-car video system in Operations Central Bureau.
Morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Maggie,
Morning.
welcome back.
Good morning. So this is just a quick update on how the...
Maggie, right into the mic, okay?
Sorry.
Okay.
This is just a brief update on how the deployment of in-car video is going in Central Bureau. That was started about a year ago. The implementation has run over the past year, and the good news is that as of this past Sunday, the 29th, we took the first division live. We went live in Newton with in-car video. The plan is to let Newton run for about 3 weeks, just make sure that we don't have any issues. All the bugs are shaken out. So far it looks good. But after about the 3-week mark, then we'll start taking each of the other divisions live. So we'll move on to Central and Central Traffic, then to Hollenbeck, Rampart, and Northeast.
Size of Central in relation to the size of South. Where is it now? In South? South
Bureau, yeah.
Size? Basically, are we doubling the program right now?
About.
Yeah. Okay, good.
About. And the plan is to have completed all of those deployments and have Central Bureau completely up and running by the end of June.
Wow. Okay. Any questions on this bit of good news here? Thank you, guys. Anything else you want to say? Chief, Dan, on this? Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're now on item 8C, Department's verbal presentation and discussion relative to the status of the review of the Los Angeles Police Department area station security cameras.
It's a tech day, Maggie. I'm sorry.
That's okay. This item actually falls under Facilities Management Division, so I'll let Mr. Brennan address most of it. I will just tell you that as far as the IT involvement is concerned, previously the functions were really split, and that I really didn't have a window into that universe of technology in terms of the cameras and security systems and all of that. Since this item has come before the commission, we've now partnered on this to take a look at the technology and determine what we can do to enhance and improve the technology. So we've had a meeting with the vendor that's on contract with the city that performs this function. I've asked for them to come back with a proposal for some improvements. They've come back with a first draft. It's not doesn't include quite everything that we may need, so I've asked them to go back and resubmit. But we've been spending quite a bit of time here together figuring out how to improve security overall, and are in the middle of that process now.
Good. They've been cooperative?
Yes.
A vendor? And,
oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning. Tom Brennan, Facilities Management Division. Currently, we have security systems that have been rolled out to all of the facilities. all of our stations with the exception of Newton, North Hollywood, and Northeast. The Northeast station is coming online with the new station, which
That's
will
under
open this summer.
construction, yeah.
It will be a brand new facility with a brand new security system. Newton and North Hollywood were both part of the Proposition 2 construction projects back in the 90s. When we did the Proposition Q renovations of the stations, those two facilities, Newton and North Hollywood, were not eligible to have Proposition Q funding to upgrade their facilities because of the language and the way the bonds work. So we upgraded all the rest of the facilities. We did have at the time Proposition 2 money that was left over that we had planned to use for that, but the city repurposed it for other projects. Those two projects are both in this coming fiscal year's budget. So depending on the council and mayor's budget plan, we would hopefully have the funding to put those security.
What's the cost of those, both of those?
They run close to $400,000.
Each or total?
Each. Okay. To put in all the cameras, all of the security components that go along with the cameras, the recorders, each one of those to do that. Beyond that, we are in the process of evaluating the system that we put in place. We're at the point where we need to start looking at life cycle replacement of older components. The system's about 13 years old now. So technology has improved, the quality of cameras has improved, and all these components don't last forever. So that is something that the department has graciously given me some staff to work on putting those evaluations together. Again, we're working with the vendor. We really do want to upgrade the quality of the systems and ensure that every facility, we're working with the folks in the facilities to make sure that we have coverage in those areas where incidents are most likely to happen that could affect risk management issues. So we're going back and evaluating all of that. We may need to add some cameras. We may need to change some cameras. But overall, that's the plan that we're moving forward with.
Okay. Questions?
Yeah, if I remember right, part of why we're looking into this was an Inspector General's report pointing out that a number of the cameras weren't working at all, that there were a number of areas in the various facilities where there weren't cameras, and it would have been helpful to have them. And this last point that you were talking about, I guess I'm curious. I understand you're doing the evaluation, but I guess I'm interested in what you're seeing going forward, timing, and when those kinds of improvements that the Inspector General has called for are likely to be made.
It's the majority of it is going to depend on funding, sir. The critical areas, as we're going through and reviewing with station personnel, where we've determined that there have been areas that need to be covered that aren't. There were a couple of stations that we determined that the area where when individuals are brought to the station and come out of cars and go into the building, that there was no coverage. We've evaluated that, and we have been able to put cameras in at a couple of those stations. So we're dealing with the most critical situations where we can with funding that we can find.
Will we be getting a written report which will describe each of the facilities and the situation in each of them and what the plan is, what the improvements?
We can certainly do that, sir, yes.
Maybe I'm misremembering. I looked to the Inspector General, but it seems to me that's what I think the direction we were going in. But correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct, Commissioner. But I think from the back end of that report, what my recommendation was that the expertise within the department and within the city got together and designed the improvements, that wasn't necessarily my lane. I don't have the expertise to do that, and that just the relevant bodies speak with each other and amongst themselves to devise a plan.
Well, I guess I would find it helpful to have a written presentation which would go through some of the detail of what you've done and what you're looking ahead at, what needs to be done, so that we can have a better sense of the progress that you're making, and to the extent there are funding issues, as you point out, that we can do what we can to assist with that.
We can absolutely do that. We have met with a variety of department entities to review the Department Security Master Plan, which addresses how we put together the security plan at each station. And we have also worked with Major Crimes to review the implementation of security systems at the new facilities that we'll be putting in.
Right.
So we are looking at addressing all those issues.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Madison?
Could you also, when you do put together the report, just identify it for us what the priorities are? Because in a general sense, when we talk about security cameras, you know, it could be in terms of trespasses, but I'm sure there's much, much more that goes into it. So when you say, for example, that the stations that had the biggest need, you've taken care of a couple of those, I'd like more understanding of what's defined as the need.
We will include that.
And let me clarify. I certainly appreciate that the details of this is not something that we would want to have made public, but I think the commission would be interested in the progress in general. And I'll suggest to the president that maybe two of us be appointed so we can talk to you in more detail about the specifics, so that we have a better sense of exactly
I'm
what's happening.
concerned. I'm concerned that the purpose of police department area station security cameras is for security in the police stations. And the idea of broadcasting to the world where every single camera is and sending out blueprints is not what we're intending at all.
I understand. That's
okay.
I think we can put this together
Okay.
in this presentation that will address the information that you need without.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to
getting
make sure I
deep,
wasn't
too deep
Yeah.
into the
you didn't
details of how the system
misunderstand, but
works.
that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Next, item 8D, and so the comments on item 8D will hold till the.
Thank you.
Right.
That's correct. I'm looking at the city attorney, so the comment
Yes.
card on 8D will be held until it's considered
Until
on
the
That is
April
correct,
14th.
because,
Yeah.
because under the Brown Act, as long as you allow the public to comment before or during the consideration, which will occur in a future meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we're now on item 8F, Inspector General's report dated March 31st, 2015, relative to the review of the digital in-car video system.
Commissioners, Alex Bustamante, Inspector General's office. Also seated at the table from my office will be Jim Willis, the Assistant Inspector General who conducted the investigation. The digital in-car video system, commonly called DICVS, is currently being used in Operation South Bureau. There has been some briefing about its rollout in Central, and there'll be further rollout as Ms. Goodrich has already indicated. My report is not on the system itself. I believe the system is invaluable and functions as designed. The report is about the operation or end use of the system. During the investigation, my office noted that Operation South Bureau and the Department's Office of Operations had been constantly reevaluating the use of the system and designing improvements for the operation of that system. To that end, my analysis was designed to complement these evaluations by providing an independent assessment of the use of the system and then work with the department in fashioning material improvements to that system. The investigation identified, as set forth in the report, a series of areas that would benefit from improvements. Once we identified these issues, I discussed our report with Chief Villegas from the Office of Operation and Chief Scott from Operation South Bureau, who were immediately responsive in addressing the identified areas. Both Chief Villegas and Chief Scott worked closely with my office in designing improvements to the operation of the system. Within a couple of meetings, the department and the OIG fashioned improvements set forth in the conclusion of the report. I believe those improvements will address the issues identified within the report. And after conversations with both chiefs, it is clear the department is trying to continually improve the existing system. Commissioners, I want to thank Chief Villegas and Chief Scott for their quick and thoughtful effort in devising the improvements to the system. We've worked constructively together on a variety of issues, and this is just another example of that cooperation. I will be evaluating the improvements to determine that what was set forth at the end of this report, if the Commission were to adopt them, do have the desired effect, and I will be working with OO and OSB to make sure that they are fully implemented. And pending any questions you may have, myself or Mr. Willis are here for your questions.
I find the timing of this to be perfect because I know how important it is where we are in the creation of the policy that will be coming on the on-body cameras, and to have this frank and open look at in-car, what can we do better, or what are we doing right, and the improvements that have been made even in the past months. In 6 months, I think the timing is perfect. So I'm glad you were able to coordinate this. Any questions? Specific questions?
I have a question about, it's on page 11, under pedestrian stops, and I fully recognize and understand why it's stated in the report that the Inspector General was able to verify 40% of the pedestrian stops because the in-car video is really not designed to capture that. It's a limitation on the system. So if 58% of them can't be verified, do you have a sense that the on-body cameras are likely to close that gap?
I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful that that's the case. I mean, as we set out in our report, the pedestrian stops, as you noted, Commissioner, are incredibly dynamic, and sometimes that's an impediment to the videotaping, given the angle of the camera within the vehicle. I think that the on-body cameras will create that extra layer that'll give us additional information on, what happened during pedestrian stops or in other contacts with the community.
Is the technology in in-car video changing? I mean, we've had, between what we're just installing now and what we've had in the first generation, and do you think that any of these, if the technology has been moving forward, will that affect and help the implementation of any of these recommendations by the Inspector General and the Department?
Good morning, Commissioners. Dan Gomez, Information Technology Bureau. So the short answer is yes. The original system was purchased in about 2006. We're now talking about a much newer system, so the quality of the video, the angle of the lens has improved slightly.
Okay.
The quality of the chipsets that are inside the cameras are all better, so that creates a little bit better quality. The microphones are better, so there is a total improvement in the system. To the naked eye, it may not be quite as, but on the technical side of the house, we see a lot of that, the way it's reported. But there will be some video quality that is better, and the audio will be better, and a slightly wider field of view.
Hey, Danny, why don't you speak to the angle of the lens and how it's changed?
I think that's important.
So today, the angle of the lens is 42 degrees. That is a standard for standard definition video.
45 this, so
Correct.
42 is like that.
Correct.
Okay.
Do you want to show the?
We have if you'd like to see a diagram of it.
I have a bad wrist.
Let me help you out, Commissioner.
What's that, a protractor? Is that what measures the angle? Yeah. I'm from the old days.
Me too.
Okay, there you go.
So this is a 42-degree angle of the current system. This is a typical traffic stop. I tried to put on as much information on there that I thought was relevant for you. But this is everything that you see in the yellow is the viewable angle of the camera. In the traffic stop is typically from bumper to bumper, approximately the length of a car, which is about 10 feet. And with that in mind, you're almost 20 feet from the actual camera itself to about the center of the vehicle, where an officer would typically make contact with the person he or she is pulling over.
Dan,
and that's
can I ask you
42
a question?
degrees.
When that camera goes on, and it goes on automatically during Code 3 and then the other times according to the policy, there's a second camera in the car, correct?
There is a second camera.
It's facing back. Which way is it facing?
It is facing inside the back seat of the cab. That is separately activated. So that is designed specifically for transport.
It's not looking out the back window.
It does not.
Okay.
It's specifically for the back cab of the vehicle.
Got it. Thanks.
And that's for when a suspect is in custody.
Sure.
So everything you see in the light blue color is obviously areas that the camera just simply cannot see. Only that in the yellow is what's viewable on the camera. So in the next generation, we're moving up into about a 46-degree angle where you'll get slightly more of the left and right of the camera, but today it is at 42 degrees.
Okay. questions?
I
Comments?
do have some. At first, I want to echo the Inspector General's comments, particularly thanking Chief Villegas and Chief Scott for the prompt responses and the substantive responses to the concerns that had been raised. The report makes clear that working together, that there have been joint development of improvements, some of which have already been implemented, and I appreciate that very much and think it's important to acknowledge that. Also want to just remind each of us that to a great extent, this is still a result from the consent decree, from the resolution of the consent decree, the concerns about biased policing, and in particular, our ability to evaluate the interactions with the public. That this was a dramatic, significant part of our being able to resolve that, and just reminds us of how important it is. And also, just to comment, as the report makes clear, how very helpful the cameras have been for the traffic stops, and how less helpful they've been, but less helpful with respect to pedestrian stops. And I understand we're between the on-body cameras and other changes, we should be able to be making some improvements with those. I do have just a few questions. Some would be for the department and some, I guess, for the Inspector General. My first one is on page 4.
Of the Inspector General's report?
Page 4 of the Inspector General's report, there's the third bullet. Officers might inspect the condition of their cradle port antenna. Supervisors are required to conduct at least 2 cradle port and 2 microphone antenna inspections each day and document these on their daily log. And I guess I'd be interested in hearing from the department about how that's been implemented, whether you've had the ability to inspect that or audit that, and how that's going.
Yeah, they do audit that, and the supervisor audit it, as well as each division has, I don't want to call it an audit team, but a set of officers that reviews the processes that are in place within. I think we have 3 South Bureau orders that implements the protocols and the processes. This is one of those, and they look to ensure that they're being followed. When they're not being followed, then there's some type of measurable documentation, whether it's training, counseling, and or some form of notice to correct that, or an employee comment sheet, whatever is appropriate for the circumstance that takes place.
And so, Chief, you're confident that the kinds of problems that we saw initially with respect to the antennas, that the system you've implemented would, if something like that were to happen again, you would discover it pretty quickly and be able to respond to it?
We should, yes.
Right. Thank you.
And in fact, the number of those incidents since have been what?
I don't believe there's been
I don't
any.
think there's been any.
There hasn't been any.
Yeah. So this seems to be effective.
Right. One of the most significant things coming out of this is the special order, which, among other things, will require the activation of the cameras when initiating the stop.
What page is that, Rob? Is it the same
bottom
page?
of page 9, on
Okay.
the last paragraph. Department's currently working with the Inspector General to develop a draft special order that explicitly requires officers to activate their DICVS at the initiation of the stop. And just a question of for the department and the IG about the timing of when we're likely to see that special order.
Well, I can address that, Commissioner R. Falikhan, Special Assistant for Constitutional Policing. I should clarify, the current policy does require in pedestrian stops that the officers initiate the camera. There is a clause that says when practicable, which has caused some confusion. In my opinion, it's a bit redundant because it really refers to an exigent circumstance, which is also in the current policy. I believe it was put in back in 2009 simply to recognize that there's not an automated activation of the camera, similar to the vehicle stops when the light bar is activated, which, of course, precedes having to make a stop, it's going to turn on. When you're doing a pedestrian stop, it would have to be manually activated. So we've recognized this issue for some time. We've been working on...
Sorry, just when conducting a pedestrian stop, using the digital in-car.
Yes.
Okay.
You would have to manually activate it, typically on the microphone or on the console.
Because you're not code 3.
Because you're not code 3.
Lights and sirens.
And it all depends, obviously, on the circumstances. Unless you turn on the light bar, it won't automatically come on. So it was a recognition that there are going to be some limited circumstances where an officer may have to get out of the car very quickly and not able to activate it immediately. And recognizing that there are going to be exigent circumstances where that would happen, and they would have to note that in their log. We are working on, there's been a draft of the in-car video policy that's been going around for quite some time. As Commissioner Sobroff, you mentioned on the on-body video, we're currently in the process of developing that and working with the Police Protective League. Our position has been we wanted to hold off on the digital in-car, do the on-body video. We're making a series of improvements in terms of language and clarity that we would then harmonize with the digital in-car video. So to answer your question more directly, Commissioner, it's all dependent on when we get through with the on-body video policy.
And do you have any sense of that?
We're in meet and confer currently. I would reserve judgment until that's completed, just to be safe. But we are
Meeting every week.
we are actively working with them,
Right.
and we hope to have it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
We know
I guess my harmonizing two makes a lot of sense to me. My only concern would be if one is going to take, if the on-body is going to take a long time, which I hope it doesn't, then I think we should move forward on making the corrections here, the improvements here that are recommended.
And any improvement that we or change we'd make in the digital in-car video would also require us to go to meet and confer.
Oh.
So I'm
that
not
case.
sure we could fast track that any differently. That's why one is, we're hopeful that if we come to agreement on everything on body,
And I think
video.
we're all, okay, thank you. And I think we're all in agreement that we would like this sooner rather than later. So.
I call them every day.
Okay. I have a question for the Inspector General. On page 11, there's a footnote at the bottom, footnote 21, which refers to a small set of pedestrian stops, refer to the department for analysis and possible further action. Could you just a sentence or two about that? I'm not asking about specifics of the incidents, but just I'd like to understand a little better what's happening there.
There were a couple cases where we didn't have all the information. We had some that raised some questions for us, and we provided them for the department so that their people, training, tactics, everyone else could look at those couple cases and determine whether it was something that didn't require action or whether other action was merited given the circumstances. And that's not uncommon. I mean, what we'll do when we do audits or we do other investigations, if we find little one-offs or little issues that come along the way, we'll share them with the department, especially if we think they raise further issues to make sure that we can kind of close the loop on things.
And then once the Inspector General's done that, can you just help me understand what happens on the department side?
I can. The Inspector General provided us the numbers for 17 videos that it saw that were problematic or potentially problematic. We then had Andy Markell from our training division on tactics, a police performance auditor, and Sergeant Gomez review each of the videos to see if there was anything of concern.
And actually, just to clarify, just to make sure the record's correct, the 17 included some videos that were innocuous. They demonstrated a point that we were talking about, or they brought up a training-related issue that needed to be done with. The subset of cases that we think really merited additional review were incredibly small. It was of that amount of cases that were communicated to the department. There were, I think, 2 cases that we thought required some additional investigation to determine whether there were any issues.
Thank you. My next question, page 12, toward the bottom, the second to last paragraph. There's a discussion of what sounds like a very positive development from 77th Street area, developing an access database to track the feedback provided and some of the other factors that are being monitored. And then there's suggestion of potentially expanding that more widely. And it seems like a very good thing. I would be interested in just a few sentences of explanation of that, how it's coming about, what your sense is of wider implementation of that.
At today's direct reports meetings, we meet on Tuesdays, and following this report, we were going to have a discussion at length with respect to implementing it not only in South Bureau but as well as in Central Bureau as we unfold it in Central Bureau. So there's some discussion on that, and what I want to make sure that we do is do it uniformly in the Office of Operations.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a couple more questions. Page 13, the footnote at the bottom, footnote 22, raises, I guess I'd like, Inspector General, if you can help me understand a little better what the point is that you're making there. I understand, I think, underlying question is when there's a stop and the officer asks a person, are you on probation or parole? Can you just help me understand a little better what's going on there, what the point is of the footnote about that process?
The point that we were trying to make in the report was that, and I think what we shared with the department was that better documentation will assist in some of the review, especially when things are possibly not captured by the video camera. It wasn't meant to indicate that there were anything discrepant or any issues with the stop. Sometimes we're just not able to determine, and by talking with the department and find ways to improve the amount of information that supervisors can obtain and review, and quite frankly my office can review, that we get an overall better product on there. So it wasn't indicating that you had anything that was discrepant on there. It was quite frankly that there are some cases that we didn't have information, and we wanted to devise a system with the department on how we could improve the ability to gain that information. And just to give you a little additional information on that as well, when we had some of the improvements, and both the department and I agreed in principle on how to make those improvements, OO and OSB were very cooperative and allowed my team to go and meet with their training coordinators, even at the division level, just to make sure that from the top down that we were all talking about the same thing. We were able to identify things. And I thought that was a very cooperative relationship, but more importantly, was able for us to communicate directly to the individuals that are doing the training in the different divisions to ensure that they were able to kind of get out to the officers what we thought was important. And that was done by my staff working closely with OO and OSB.
Thank you.
Commissioner Salzman?
I'm sorry, yes.
Jim Willis. The one thing that's going to augment or maybe assist digital in-car video will be the special order, Office of Operations order about the computer-aided dispatch summary report, which is in short the electronic daily field activity report, or the DFAR. And that's going to allow a lot more input for the disposition of calls. Right now, officers are working with the paper copy of the DFAR, and as described in officer footnote dividers, they're supposed to use abbreviations and be brief in their descriptions, and I think the new electronic DFAR will kind of change that.
Right, thank you. I just have one. I'm sorry. Go.
I just want to jump in on just that part of it. Chief Agus, could you just the question of are you on probation or parole, and it says they're routinely asked that. Does that mean it's like when you're stopped and asked for your license and registration? Is that question, are you on probation or parole, always asked too?
Well, I can't say that it's always asked, and certainly it is a valid question, but it just it's determined upon the circumstance and the situation. And that's one of the discussion points that we had with the Inspector General, and it's one of the discussion points that we're having today, and we've had it in previous meetings, and that is, at what point in time do you ask that question? Should you ask that question? And to ensure that there is an appropriateness in terms of when that question is being asked. Because it shouldn't be asked just routinely as a matter of, do you have a driver's license and registration, but rather because of the reasonable suspicion or the information that's specifically articulable that causes you to ask those types of questions. So it's a training issue for us in the department overall, and it's something that we're going to pursue with respect to the implementation of standardized roll call training. That's going to be one of the aspects that we do in the training, is to ensure that we're incorporating reasonable suspicion, consensual encounters, and probable cause in that training, so that it's a consistent discussion piece over time.
Right, and I asked that because in speaking to people, I've heard that as a sore point on numerous occasions. And I'm not talking about LAPD, I mean just generally that being asked Are you on probation or parole? It's like, why are you asking me that? And so the second part of that is when you run somebody's license, would that ordinarily come up?
Not if you're just running the driver's license. I mean, there's different runs that you do when you query it on the computer, and that's based upon, again, what information you have during the detention or during the traffic stop that would cause you to
Right.
to
So
do a
there's
query.
validity for, it's not just a shortcut, there really is validity to asking that question.
There should be, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I just one last question. So on page 14, the third paragraph provides a lot of information that that was new and that has gotten some public attention. And that has to do with how much the department is able to review the video and audio as a routine or not. And the Inspector General points out, I think quite appropriately, that in particular cases where there are questions, there's been a use of force, the department has been quite successful, and the IG has in using this, but that the resources that would be required to do it routinely would be extraordinary. And I thought it would be worth asking two things. One, the department just to talk about that a little bit, make sure we understand that, because there's been some public discussion of that, which I think may have been off track. And second, I'd like to hear from the Inspector General about this a little more. He says, Inspector General will perform regular and substantive reviews of the footage and stops as a way to help the department do this. And overall, I think the most significant part of this is the cooperation going on and the positive steps being made. And I don't want to lose that with the questions. But I would find it helpful just for you to talk a little bit about the resources and also to hear from the Inspector General a little bit about this follow-up routine thing that you're going to do.
Well, let me just by way of background, from April of 2010 through March of 2015, we have 1.3 million recordings.
You have not reviewed all 1.3 million?
And we have not reviewed all of them. That's a daily average of about 717 recordings, and each recording is about 12 or so minutes in length. So that's a lot of recordings. And
it's just not feasible to...
Correct. Yeah, exactly. This is only
one bureau.
South Bureau.
Right.
And
so the expectation, to the extent anyone has that expectation, that every piece of audio and video is being reviewed, that's just incorrect. It's just not feasible.
Correct.
On the other hand, where we have any indication, well, I'll let you say it. So,
what we are doing, because we can't inspect all of them, and which is clear, I think, by those numbers, is that we are inspecting everything that has any type of personnel complaint investigation with body camera, because that's obvious evidence that's there. Any fleet safety issue, any pursuit, any use of force. So any of those factors that we need to do an administrative investigation and someone has the on-body camera or digital in-car video in this case, is going to be looked at. In addition to that, the department has already done 3 inspections or audits on its own, as well as South Bureau has been doing periodic random samplings and looking at for making sure that we're using the camera correctly, it's being turned on when it's supposed to be, and for tactical issues to identify if there are any training scenarios that can be improved upon by the officers and or the department. So we're doing that.
Thank you.
So we're going to be doing, we're going to have to expand that clearly because we're going into Central Bureau and eventually we'll go through the rest of the department. So in so doing, we're making sure that the officers that we have that are going to be looking at the material or for audits and inspections have a level of training that gives us a comfort that they can conduct audits and or inspections. So we're marrying up with IAID so that they can provide I think it's 4 days of training so that there's a standard methodology that they follow when they're actually looking at and inspecting the videos.
So could you just walk me through the process a little bit? And I'll follow up on Commissioner Madison's questions, which I share. So if an individual has been stopped and the individual feels like something inappropriate happened, they were asked, are you on probation or parole, in their view, without any justification. If that individual then goes to does whatever he or she wants to do to raise that question online, telephone call, goes to the station. Can you just walk me, is that then going to bring about this review of what the audio or video is?
Well, as you know, any complaint we take any complaint and we conduct an investigation to find out the truth of the matter. So if there's a complaint with respect to what transpired during a traffic stop or a pet stop and there was in-car video or on-body camera, we're going to view that video to verify the actions of the officer and or the actions of the...
And so I guess I have 2 points from that. One is I appreciate that, and it's important. And the second is, I think, if any of us feel like something like that happens that's inappropriate, the right thing to do, if you're concerned about it, is to come forward and ask about it so that it can be looked at. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that as well. And then I also...
Commissioner, could I just to clarify, because I think you brought up an important point about the thoroughness of the reviews by the department. As Chief Villegas said, there are going to be certain reviews that are prompted by particular actions. A complaint from a citizen, an internal affairs investigation, any use of force, a pursuit, a traffic collision, and other administrative investigations. And as you know, there's a high volume of those that are constantly reviewed at various levels to ensure, as part of the investigation. But there are reviews at the divisional level and inspections at the bureau level, and then outside of South Bureau or any of the Office of Operations by Internal Audits and Inspections Division, which is done on a fiscal year basis. And they review, consistent with all the government accounting standards, everything from training to the activation to making sure everything's covered, synchronizing the microphones and documenting everything that happens. So there is a fairly robust review. Obviously, it's very difficult to do that with 1.3 million recordings that will double with Central Bureau and that will quadruple with on-body video. But it's very important to us that we make sure that we have periodic and sometimes randomized reviews at every level and making sure, especially on the audits, that they're stratified samples so they cover all the divisions and all of the different factors involved.
Thank you.
Maggie, maybe you can talk a little bit about analytics and the future, or if Danny can, either one.
Thank you, Chief. So as part of our due diligence, we're always going out to a variety of companies and looking at kind of the state of the industry. And right now, among big data across the entire country, analytics are really coming to the forefront. There's a lot of advances that are happening. One with recognition of patterns, both from people, recognition of vehicles and discerning vehicles versus people. So all those analytics are things that we're looking at. The companies that we work with obviously have an incentive to make sure that they're looking at these things as well. But we're not just solely relying on the companies themselves. We do our own research. We go out and we're looking for the best. We've also talked to some universities in terms of what they're doing and how they're looking at things. Because again, I don't think we have to wait for industry. Sometimes we have to push industry the direction we want them to go. And that's part of one of the things that we're doing for in-car video and body camera.
So video analytics would be a program that overlays all in-car video and picks up uses of force. We could pick up keywords, and in other words, so that way you don't have to go through 1.3 million 12-minute stops times 4. The video analytics goes through it for you and would pick out specific things that you would be interested in doing, and that's the future of all this. So in the meantime, this is all things that we will do the best we can do with what we have.
Good.
Thank you.
And then, Inspector General, if you could just talk a little bit about the follow-up that you're going to do.
Sure. I mean, as noted in the report, the department does do the highest risk areas that they talk about: high-speed pursuit, complaint, use of force investigation, use of force incident. And they would look at, as we noted in the report, on the bulk of them, they were activated appropriately, on and off. And there wasn't a detailed analysis of things that transpired on all of them for the sheer volume of cases that came forward. After talking with the department and talking with OO and OSB, what my office will plan to do is do a series of audits that are going to look beyond what has been looked at for the bulk of those things by the department and try to identify any of the issues that may create training issues, may result in other items or other concerns the department can address. And the idea is that we will be doing shorter audits. I mean, obviously, because of the great volume there, we're going to have to take samples and then extrapolate from those samples. But the idea is to try to identify things that may not be caught in those areas that are being thoroughly reviewed by the department. And because of the volume, we'll probably have to limit ourselves into a deployment period, one deployment period or two deployment periods for a division or a geographic bureau, and then it'll probably take us some time to work through those. But the idea is to at least keep eyes on in those areas.
It's interesting that since the consent decree was mentioned in the IG's report, just to remind that the consent decree resulted from the complaint of the U.S. government that the city and the LAPD were violating the U.S. Constitution by engaging in a pattern or practice of unconstitutional or otherwise unlawful conduct that has been possible by the failure of the city to adopt proper management practices and procedures. Which brings me to this report that the issue of in-car video cameras date back to the Christopher Commission recommendations in the aftermath of the Rodney King beating. But 24 years later, we're still trying to figure out the kinks. We're still trying to figure out why they're asking whether you're on probation or parole. That should really raise a lot of red flags. I mean, because what's missing in the Inspector General audit is that while it does, as typical of Mr. Bustamante, does the procedural audit, and just to remind him, too, that, post Rodney King and post his own office was created as a result of all these rampart scandals and conspiracies and murders in violation of the Constitution. But yet at the same time, there is no mention of what happened, that how the consent decree was fundamentally sabotaged, how the consent decree, how antennas were tampered. There's no mention of writing a letter to the Department of Justice. There's no mention of even informing Judge Fess, because what had happened was that when the consent decree was lifted by Judge Fess, it was, and I quote, it was after the city and police leaders made assurances that LAPD had adequate safeguards, such as the cameras, in-car video cameras in place to monitor itself. But yet again, we have these audits, we have this whole procedural thing done, and you raise good questions. I appreciate it, Commissioner Bustamante, but yet, Salzman, but yet at the same time, something fundamentally is missing. We're still at the same point where we were 24 years ago, that the department continues to violate the spirit and principles of these consent decrees.
Thank you.
So do something about it.
Michael Hunt.
Yes, this weekend I was part of that video camera. I was arrested with a video camera watching me for vending with a California state permit, outside vending with a camera on me, taken to jail. Chief Beck, what's going on? You lie like a rug. You lie like a rug. You said that you wasn't going to take nobody to jail for a $100 ticket. You did. You came out Viragosa's house, and you lied like a rug. You said you was going to uphold the federal consent decree, which you have not done. You said you wasn't going to ticket people, and I feel that as an individual, you're trying to assassinate my business, my character, and me. I want the FBI to come in and investigate this whole unit at the Pacific Division, starting with Chief Beck, arrested 69 times with a vending permit. In my designated spot, I was arrested with a camera. Chief Beck, why you can't look? Because you lie like a rug. Everything that you said when you came out of Viragosa's house is a lie. You don't get the gist. It's called Brandenburg versus Ohio.
Prentice Jackson. I'm sorry, Prentice Jenkins.
Regarding digital cameras in the car, the question is, if they can only be operated by the cop in the car, how many times are we going to actually see body cameras? I mean, really? I mean, based on your questions about them asking people about their whether they were on drugs or they have any drugs or weapons on them. That actually happened to me, and it happened to me when I had a white friend who was really wound tight. He was a really good friend, and he was ready to blow any day. And he was driving, and he just decided he wanted to get on the highway, and the guy wouldn't let him come get on the highway, so he rammed his car. And he was about to take off, and I told him there's a cop over there. Cop comes over. They have him get out of the car. They take him over somewhere, and they make me get out of the car. The cop, I'm sorry, this was in the LAPD. This was in Garden Grove. They got me out of the car. They asked me if I was on parole. They asked me if I had any drugs, if I had any guns. And after it was all over, 2 hours later, he comes over to me. My friend said, "What were they asking you?" I said, "They asked me if I was on parole, and then they searched me." I said, "Didn't they do that to you?" He said, "No." This man, he was responsible for the actual accident. But because he was white, they didn't search him. I was a passenger. I had nothing to do with it. They searched me, asked me if I was on drugs. He said they didn't ask him any of that stuff. All they did was took his information. One of the passengers in the other car, they let her take off. And she came back. She was probably getting rid of the drugs, and then she came back. But that actually happened. So the question is, who has control over these body cameras? And if they do have control of the body cameras, are you going to release the video on the body cameras?
Next.
Ted Hayes. And then we have two additional cards. We have Yvonne Michelle Autry and Wayne Spindler.
It's pretty much like the cop show. The light bar goes on, the car stops, and the officers tell the suspect, "You know the routine, up against the wall." That wall is not within the 42-degree angle, okay? Now, the thing that concerns me is turning on, activating that bar, light bar. I have a telephone, cell phone, and landline. I can push my Bluetooth. Anybody ever heard of Bluetooth? And my landline is connected to my cell phone. Why can't, when they turn the light bar on, that the video camera on the officer activated also? My phone costs $49 to do that. The B-Tech. Look it up. You can talk on your cell phone and your cordless phones at home just by pushing the Bluetooth. So if you make that connection with the body cameras, you have a complete circuitry of video from the car to the body camera. Also, it may be on the verge of contempt of cop, but Miranda exists whether they read to it that stuff or not. If you say, "I just came from the Burger King," well, that's right next door to where the robbery occurred. Unfortunately, that's a connection, a reasonable suspicion. Keep your mouth shut. Don't talk to the cops. Any lawyer would tell you that. And I just can't understand why we can't see the video from Africa. That might be conclusive proof of the value of the video camera. The City Council asked for an update. It's on the agenda. I hope I'll get an opportunity to speak on it. But let's find out what that Africa video shows.
Yvonne Michelle Autry.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for another opportunity to address the commissioners. Hopefully it seems as to no avail. Having been a participant in submission of in excess of over 300 complaints, I wonder to what degree are these videos useful? Are they being edited? Our complaints have continually come back unfounded, 300 people and more. Of course, I'm speaking specifically relative to Los Angeles Community Action Network's complaints. How are we all unfounded in our organized collective complaints against certain officers, notwithstanding the officers that do serve and protect irregardless of color, gender, and economic status? How are we all considered liars and our complaints are unfounded? So to what degree are these videos even useful? Are they being edited? Are they selectively viewed? And why don't we have an oversight committee, which many of the residents' constituents have urged you for so long, because you're reviewing yourselves. And again, I'm not speaking to the police officers that, that are unbiased. But there's something, as Hamid said, that is awry here. Either you're lying or you know what this is. You're being commissioned to exterminate black people, people you put in the trash, people you think are ugly or that stink or that you don't like, or people that you want to frame or that you like to not look at anymore, or blame for some of your, making us culpable in reversing culpability. So again, is this wasting taxpayers' dollars? Because the violations of our civil rights, the justifiable homicides, which is really unjustifiable homicide, when these police officers should be prosecuted and penalized to the fullest extent of the law. So I see it as a waste of our money because they're not serving the purpose in prosecuting possible homicidal police officers.
Thank you. Next.
Yes, 42-degree angle. 1970s technology. Stupid. So the way that you get your out-of-date technology that you overpay for, I did this very long diagram. There's 4 steps to every City of Los Angeles contract. 1, they give you out-of-date technology. 2, they find dumb cities ran by dumb people. This is the epitome of the worst ran city in the United States of America, because it's ran by people who buy office. They're not selected by the people. Our vote doesn't matter. We are given a ballot with campaign donor-fed idiots. So number 3, you sign the contract and you overpay for the technology. 42 degrees, you can have a 90-degree camera. You can have a 180-degree camera. Now, by the time you realize this, you've declared the technology obsolete. And then you go back to step 1. You'll get more out-of-date technology. See, so you can have a 180-degree view because you need that. On the left and to the right, that's where they get out of the car, and that's where they harass the people like they love to do. And then finally, the question came up about asking for warrants and arrests. Commissioner Paula Madison, have you ever been arrested, and are you on parole? You don't have to answer that question. It may likely incriminate you. That's called the Miranda decision. That still is the law of the land. Maybe not for long, but it is. So you don't have to answer that question. The computer in the car, they will run the record. Now, if the person lies, they will be arrested and charged for obstruction of justice.
We have one final comment card on this item. Jerry Wilburn.
Card on camera shows that 2 inmates escaped the county jail, and no officers knew about it. In doing so, what is your obligation or of the print and ink of pictures, when in fact there is thousands of people who are burglarizing homes to alter these pictures that goes on the camera to the police to cover the police may be wrongdoing or may not be wrongdoing. Caught on camera shows the barriers all the way to London. And when you, even in the hotel registers of people that goes into a hotel, motel, and finds out that there's a prince that is murdered by the Los Angeles Police Department and the media that gives us the information or not give us the information. Because I'm trying to get the prince back to the prince where London in 1980-something just broke out of prison, and they just caught all 12 prisoners caught on camera. What we going to do about that?
We have no other comment cards on this item.
We have a motion to approve.
Mr. President, I just like to make a comment and then move approval. note that this particular discussion about the specifics of the use of the cameras began with a disappointing series of incidents about the antennas and possible tampering with the system. And happily, I think, we are not in that situation. Not only are we not where we were 24 years ago, we're not where we were less than a year ago.
Right.
We're making good progress, and I appreciate the Inspector General's role in that, and Chief Yegas and others' role in that. And the cooperation that we're seeing, I think, is quite good and is resulting in positive developments and implementations that are important. And with that as background, I move approval of item 8F.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you.
We're now on item 8K, Department's Report dated March 25th, 2015, relative to the City Council inquiry relative to the implementation of body-worn video.
I declare this Maggie Goodrich Day at the front desk.
It's good use of time, all in one day here. So what you have before you, Commissioners, is a written report on the state of the selection of body-worn video and where we are in terms of the development of the policy and the implementation. I'll just cover what we've done since I was last here, I believe in late November. So since I was last here and we announced the selection, the focus has really been on the development of the policy in particular. A number of community meetings were held, thanks to the Commission for holding those, and also seeking input via your email that went out. We had a number of responses to the online survey, and then we also had a number of meetings with sort of smaller groups of community stakeholders to receive input, as well as follow up with the ACLU again. We've begun Meet and Confer. We have our third Meet and Confer session scheduled for this Thursday. So we won't speak too much about policy at this point because that Meet and Confer process is confidential in nature. And then the other work that's been going on is on the implementation side. There's quite a bit of infrastructure work that has to be completed in order to get the cameras installed and deployed. So the docking stations for each of the cameras has to be installed, and the decision was made that the initial 860 that are purchased by the Police Foundation, thanks to the generous donations that were made, will be deployed in Newton, Mission, Central Traffic, several specialized divisions within Central, and then also SWAT has been added to that list. So the process that Sergeant Gomez now is leading is to coordinate with individuals from the city ITA agency on the network connectivity for those docking stations to allow for the upload of video to the storage, and also working with General Services Department to look at the power needs for that equipment and ensure that we'll have sufficient power, cooling, et cetera, for any equipment that is installed. So that task is underway now. We've done site visits to each of the locations. We're putting designs together, meeting with the vendor to understand what the throughput on the network will be as the video is uploaded and all of that. So much of the sort of technical behind-the-scenes work is underway at the moment. The plan is to actually begin the rollout in early summer and complete it sometime in the fall. We've selected 3 divisions that are a good representation of the just state of police stations out there, and that we have a newer station in Mission, an older station in Central, and then one kind of in the middle there in Newton. So that will give us a good representation in terms of what an install will take in order to complete it, just from the infrastructure and sort of back-end IT work that has to be done. So that will give us a good sense. Then hopefully come July 1, the mayor's budget will include general fund money to expand upon the initial 860, and we'll have a good sense for what that implementation then will ultimately really require in terms of resources.
Questions? I have a couple. Go ahead.
I do have just a few. On page 2, there's footnote 1 refers to a question we asked when you appeared before. The question about whether personnel involved with the evaluation, testing, or recommendations had any business relationships with TASER, Coban, or any other provider. And at that point, the answer was no. I'd just like to ask the same question again to update that. I assume the answer is still no.
The answer is still
Thank
no.
you. I appreciate that. On page 6, you were talking about the pros and cons of the various options, and the list of cons for TASER is comparatively short, which is a good thing. But I was curious if you would just talk to us a little bit about those TASER cons and what your sense is about how those issues are getting resolved.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. So we noted in previous discussions some of the issues related to the audio. We could hear some wind noise on the audio, and specifically on the second camera, which we ultimately did not select, which was the Axon Flex. The microphone was actually mounted to the right side of the camera, so it wasn't getting the projection of the voice. So that's a design feature that the company will have to go back and decide if they want to change that. But on the one that we selected, they heard us loud and clear, and so they've been looking at firmware options and actually microphone options and design options and to try to mitigate some of that wind noise. But again, I just want to clarify that all the audio was absolutely usable and good, but the question is, could it be improved? And when we did an apple-to-apples comparison, those are where we based our pros and cons against. In addition to that, because we relied heavily on the feedback of the officers, the size of the device was always an issue. I'm wearing it on my chest. To me, it's not that large, but certainly if you from going from nothing to something, then you can see why they would think it's a little large. But that is also tempered with the fact that once we explain that it's one device will last your entire 12 hours, then there's kind of a realization of that today the technology requires it to be this size. Certainly through future improvements, if batteries get better and smaller, we expect the devices to also get smaller. But we want to make sure.
And how much will all those new devices cost us?
They won't cost us anything. It's part of the initial upgrade.
So technology upgrades would include all 860 cameras, and then next year, if they buy 7,000 more, technology upgrade means when a newer and better product comes out, that we shift into that product for free after two and a half years and after the 5th year.
Correct, twice over the life of the 5-year agreement, yes. And then in terms of a few of the other cons listed on here, a few of them are being dealt with back-end technology solutions. So, for example, the individual enrollment process. In a smaller department, each officer would be asked to log in and create their evidence.com account and set all of that up. That times 7,000, we're going to have a technology solution to do that automatically in the back end.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Page 9 at the top, the report says, Department held a number of meetings with representatives from the Southern California chapter of the ACLU over the course of the field test and after the test concluded. And I may be confused, but I believe we've heard some disagreement about whether that happened or whether there's participation.
not with on-body cameras.
Okay,
I don't think.
so
I think that was a different
They've
issue.
been here several times in our conference room.
I think that was a different issue.
Okay, I'm confused. So thank you for unconfusing me. Just a couple more. Page 11 talks about the third paragraph under procurement. Should the city elect to provide general funds for additional equipment, the department will work with the city attorney and general services to ensure compliance with all city procurement rules and requirements. I guess I'd like to understand a little better what that means when you have a situation like this one. Maybe this is common, I don't know, but where the procurement process has essentially been bypassed initially, and now as we're going to expand, will involve the procurement process. I'd just like to understand how that works.
So that'll be done in consultation with the city attorney, but there are a variety of options in terms of how something like this is typically procured. So for larger systems that involve a great deal of professional consulting services, you would typically release an RFP. This type of system does not involve professional services. It's equipment and software licensing. So typically you wouldn't see an RFP. What you would see instead is an open bid through the General Services Department. So for general equipment purchases, GSD actually handles that open bidding process. So we would provide them with specifications. that meet our needs, and they would seek, typically they require 3 bids to come in on the equipment or software to be purchased. The last the last way something can be procured is through a sole source justification. That's typically only relied upon when there's one vendor that makes something very particular that isn't sold through other other avenues.
I should just add as well, I just confirm, also some of the money, as I understand, will be purchased with grant funds from the federal government, and they, of course, have additional restrictions, and working with the city attorney and the general services is very important to meet those requirements.
Thank you.
As well.
And just one last comment and question. I'm so pleased to see about the $1 million grant from NIJ, and was just curious if you could talk just a little more about that, the timing of that, what where that's likely to go, what it's likely to help us do, because it's such good news.
Sure. Actually, to Dr. Cheetah leave. Dr. Cheetah's involved in that one as well, but he stepped out. So we were able to bring in Dr. Cheetah as well as professors from George Mason University and UCLA to take a look at the impact of the body cameras, both on officer behavior, on the interaction with the community, the impact on that. And then also the other topic that just came up earlier, video analytics. And we'll be working with the group at UCLA to see if what we can develop in terms of video analytics to identify the scenarios that the chief described in terms of picking out a use of force or something like that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I don't have any further questions.
The only thing I would add on the DNIJ grant is the reason we have that grant is sitting right in front of you. There are many cities that are looking at on-body cameras, but Maggie and Danny are the national experts on this, and they are looked at across this nation as the people that understand this the best and are the most forward-thinking. And that's why we are the only entity that is getting that grant, and I expect that we will receive it for a number of years to come.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Chief. We at the last time we appeared, we also were asked if we could show an example of video at some point. We do have an example of video here today if you would like to see that.
Can I ask, are there any other questions? I've got a couple of questions regarding money. We're in an era of litigation that's getting more sophisticated, and settlements, and people are sue the department, and then somebody else sues. People are collecting money on both sides of everything now, and I think that the idea of having more sophisticated technology to stop some of this litigation, the litigation that should be stopped, is really important. So I think our timing is quite important, because we're spending tens and 20s and 30s of millions of dollars on some of these cases. Number two is just to clarify, because I've been doing a little reading also, the 860 cameras that are being delivered starting next week. How much did those cost the general fund or the city or the taxpayers?
$0.
And during the next 2 years, there are warranty packages, there are service packages, there are storage packages, there are a number of other packages that are required to meet our stringent use requirements, and also to protect people on both sides of the camera. And those are costly. And how much will those cost the public and the general fund for these 860 cameras?
The answer is also $0. All of that's paid for by the Police Foundation.
There is no cost, $0, in the first 24 months on that 860 cameras.
Correct.
The mayor has talked about adding 7,000 cameras because it is important that each officer, people who would need them, have their own system for storage, even though they can't access it. It makes it more efficient and safer versus having just common cameras laying around and you pick up one, Dan picks up one, I pick up one. And so those will be purchased as part of the budget the mayor has talked about, council members have talked about as well. That's a substantial purchase, and as technology goes on, we see that things do have a tendency to get smaller, cell phones, computers, watches, and cheaper cell phones, computers, and watches. And what happens if these get cheaper and smaller? What are in your and we have already negotiated a price. Will our price drop if they change the price to someone else or negotiate with a city that's 4 times as big police department-wise, like New York, and all of a sudden the cost goes down by 50%? Will we be able to benefit by that without having to renegotiate our...
Yes, our contracts always include a most favored nation clause that requires that we be offered the same deal that any other agency is or government entity. So if somebody else is offered a lowered price, we would be as well.
And in 2.5 years, you know, my challenge to the can you take them outside? You guys can go outside and do this.
Bother me. What do you mean don't let it bother me? Do you know what that represents? That's offensive.
I think we can go on with the meeting instead of all this baloney you guys. My challenge to the industry is to get smaller and faster and cheaper within the next 2.5 years. I want to see them the size of your badge or inside your badge in 2.5 years. That's the kind of technology that we'd like to see. My last question has to do with timing, and I just want to be really clear on this. Tell me if I'm wrong. I'm going to give 4 categories. The first is delivery of the goods, the 860 cameras. That will begin next week.
They actually arrived a little early, so they just arrived at the end of last week.
That has begun. Okay. Number 2, the next thing before they are unpacked or whatever they do is the infrastructure will be installed and the policy will be presented to the commission. These are 2 separate items.
Correct.
That's correct. And then the next issue will be once the infrastructure is installed and the policy is approved by the commission, will be the training of those who are going to wear the cameras to the policy.
Correct.
Okay. And then number 4 will be the implementation.
Yes.
Camera on, rolling.
Yes. Correct.
I want to, because I've been watching this very carefully, I want to congratulate you so far. Not done yet. You know, everything. I mean, you're not moving like this. You're climbing up a ladder where people want to knock you off and start you over. But I want to congratulate you on all of these steps. This has been we have set very high hurdles for you, and you've gone over them all. You haven't nicked one. And so thank you for this report, and we'll see you soon. Dan, you going to show us some?
Yes, I have a couple videos. The commission asked for a couple representations, so what we did is we took some of our sample videos. The first one I'd like to show you is a good illustration of the video going from darkness to light and then back into darkness. We've talked a lot about that the cameras are to mimic what an officer sees, and so this is a good representation of that.
And just to be clear, these are not actual stops in the public. This is test video created by Dan and his staff.
Yes. Yeah, all members involved are staff members of mine who all volunteered for this. And
Also, you know, one of the things you mentioned, cons, was a lack of an adjustable camera angle. But if you have 5 officers and all 5 officers are wearing them and they're all on, you're going to get some different camera
Multiple
angles.
yes.
yeah, that is correct, but it's, again, pushing the industry to see where we would like improvements.
Pushing.
So this is a no light.
So it's pitch black in there?
It is dark, and they're going from darkness to light, and they're just using their flashlight to augment their, as they would for a typical building search. So as we previously talked about, this is a 130-degree lens. It has a fisheye lens, which is why you see a little bit of the distortion on the edges.
Where do you get one of those calendars?
I'll make you a deal, Chief.
I'm glad that was the calendar. That's all we would have needed.
So of particular note on this particular entry, they're going to go from the darkness into the lit room and then back out. And you'll see, just like your eye, it's going to adjust and get very, very clear because of the ambient light. And then when they come in, it's going to, again, refocus out to adjust to the darkness. The next video I'm going to present to you is a simulated stop where the officers were attempting a narcotic stop and the suspect goes into foot pursuit and takes him into custody. Again, this is all officers within my section.
Now here the officer's turning the camera on before he even gets out of the car.
Correct. So as you know, you'll notice that there's a 30-second pre-event. So that's why you'll hear no audio, just like in the previous one, for 30 seconds. And then you'll start to hear the communication between the officers. And we tried to make this as real as possible. So in this silent part is the pre-event.
And this is an example of why it's so important to augment this with the digital in-car video, because that would be projecting forward and capture anything. And the body cameras are not a substitute for that tool as well.
So I will warn you, if you're a little bit on the motion sickness side, there's going to be some movement here.
Suspect in custody. Got him down for weapons. All right. All right. I'm gonna go you over and stand. Okay. Understand? All right. Get him up. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Wait. 1, 2. All right. All right. Come on here underneath the sheet. Why you run? What was that you just threw? What? What was that you just threw?
And you have the ability to slow motion it down, freeze frame it, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so since we record everything at 30 frames per second, the investigators can go back and go frame by frame and take that information and use it for their investigations.
Was that it?
That's it.
I like those. Show me more. Do we have any other questions?
We do have 7 public comment cards. We'll begin with Prentice Jenkins, Wayne Spindler, and Hamid Khan.
I'd like to say you're looking at getting body cameras for cops, but they won't even release that video of Africa getting shot. How are we to believe that you're going to release information on these body cameras if you won't even do that? That's ridiculous. And you say that these body cameras are going to be free. And Mr. Soboroff asked the woman, is it going to be free? She said it's zero. She was just about to tell us who was paying for it when he interrupted her. Please don't interrupt these people. We want to hear exactly who's paying for this. I don't know who's paying for it now because he interrupted her. And another thing on the last thing that I talked about, when the white cops pulled me out of the car and searched me on an incident that my white friend was responsible for, we always joked that he was on the edge. We always joked. We said, Brent, I said, B, when this goes down and you get these cops over here, I'm the one who's going to get the beating. And we joked about that all the time. And finally, it actually happened. I didn't get a beating, but they did search me, and they didn't search him. They asked me if I was on parole. They didn't ask him. He committed a crime. He purposely chased that man that didn't let him get on that, that wouldn't let him get over, and slammed into his car. It was an actual crime. The cop didn't care whether it was a crime. And B also told me that when the cop who was responsible, whose car he hit, asked him, told the cop he hit my car on purpose. The cop wouldn't listen. And Brendan said, because he's white. And Brendan always said, you're right, Lee. It's good to be white in America.
Yes, very impressive demonstration. It's got to be late 1990s technology. That's very good. That's a 20-year upgrade in technology. 7,000 cameras. Well, the first rollout is free. Just test those first. Then when you're done testing those, work out the kinks, and then make your offer in your 7,000 your cameras. But you're not going to do that. You're following my chart perfectly. Number 1, the out-of-date technology. 2, goes to the dumb city. 3, you overpay for it. And 4, it becomes obsolete. And you're even talking about it being obsolete now. That's what you're worried about. Should be worried about it. And these people here are going to tell you, Steve asked a good business question, do we get a discount if the technology goes down in the life of the contract? Well, it's only if another city gets a discount, not if the open marketplace gets a discount. You need to write that in the contract. Now, if you had real corporate lawyers and technological people separate and apart from the campaign donors running this, that clause would be in the contract. It would not be based on whether another city's offered a discount. It would be based on the lowest prevailing market rate available to all purchasers and end users. But you're not going to put that in there, because if you put that in there, they're not going to give you the free cameras, because they're not going to be able to have the dumb city overpay for the obsolete technology. Then you won't be following my chart. You have to follow my chart, or it wouldn't be any fun to go to these meetings. I'd have to stay home and say, this is a well-run city. Can't have that.
Hamid Khan, followed by Jerry Dietrich, Ted Hayes, and Iman Michelle Autry.
And that's it.
Hello, Hamid Khan with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. I think what's missing crucially in all this razzle and dazzle is the other side of the story as well, where we have statements from Ochida and some other folks as well, but whereas Michael D. White, who's an Arizona State University criminology professor, in writing for DOJ stated, then I quote, that there's been absolutely no research done to support the claim that body cameras would foster greater trust between communities and the people. Or even the chief of Salt Lake City Police, Chief Chris Burbank, where he says that body cameras don't prevent police misconduct or use of force. They are just an avenue to document officers' encounters with citizens and in most cases capture the good work of police officers. What's also missing is, in the analysis, the body cameras, is the financial details surrounding, and Steve Soboroff asked of them, but not in the context of LAPD and the LA Police Foundation and Taser International's role in that, where there's clearly conflict of interest that is going on, where Taser International has donated over $84,000 to the Police Foundation in the form of 80 stun guns, valued at approximately $82,000, as well as $2,500 in cash donations throughout 2014. This even earned them a one-star sponsor status at the LAPD's annual 2014 True Blue Gala. So, and then, of course, like when you look at Taser International's CEO, Rick Smith, has commented that Axon cameras are not that interesting from an investor standpoint, and it's a commoditized product with the real profit potentially coming from data management offerings of evidence.com. So, and it's estimated that the officer safety plan designed by Taser in close conjunction with the LAPD will at least run about $24 million through Taser International. So when you have all these things and the failure to mention that how body cameras fit into the larger architecture of surveillance, we're once again back to 1991.
Next. Thank you.
And I know you wouldn't like that, so I think this is a bad deal.
Jerry Dietrich.
Okay, well, I'm Jerry Dietrich. I'm with the Stop LAPD Spine Coalition. And I personally was impressed when you guys were going to talk to the people to hear what they had to say about these body cameras. You went to South Central, you went to Canoga Park, but it seems like nothing came of that. So the body cameras are happening. And I was told at the beginning that the body cameras were happening. We're here to just hear about how you want them and all, but I don't understand that. I wanted to hear the community say whether or not they wanted them. That's what I wanted. But I was outvoted. Anyhow, the second thing I wanted to talk about was your feedback survey. It's online. I know you understand that, but 60% of seniors have no access to the web. So you have just disqualified a whole lot of people from telling you their opinion of anything. And I belong to an organization, we have this problem too, because seniors are not on the web. You say there's that public libraries, I understand that, people could go there, and I think that way too, but they don't. It's just not happening. So we have to find some other way to talk to these people to find out how they feel about these issues. This next thing is the questions that you ask. You don't ask whether or not cameras should be used. You ask, like, should cops be able to review the footage after, before they do a official report? I think so. No, but anyhow, you don't ask the correct questions. But the third item I want to say is my personal opinion on body cameras is that they shouldn't exist. But the officer said that you turn them on and they do 30 seconds before and it's wonderful and all that. I understand that. But once a cop turns it off, when something is happening that they don't want recorded, they turn it off. Does it go on for another 30 seconds? And if it does, who sees it? And I don't know. You know, it's just a question.
Ted Hayes.
This is what annoys us most of all. Sheriff McDonald was on the air last week. He's doing a test on 4 cameras. He's communicating with other agencies who already have the cameras up and running. Why is there no cooperation between the LAPD and the Sheriff's Department? Why is it this antagonism, this rivalry? It serves no purpose. Can't you recognize if the sheriff and you are pursuing the same means, you ought to collaborate? No, that's brown and we're blue. Come on. Now, at all times looking at the video, I tried to focus on the holster of the officer who did the takedown. Couldn't see whether or not the suspect could have wrestled with him for the gun. That gives me a reasonable suspicion that later on we won't find out what happened with Africa. Not by video, at least. Now, the thought of the technology fading is very important because it will. And my biggest con on the camera is the fact that the officer is the tripod of the camera. The camera is mounted on the officer. Wherever he moves his body, that's where the camera moves. And I'm not suggesting they would not move in the direction where the video would take place. I'm just saying the ordinary activity of an officer, from my understanding, in many instances, would take the picture out of view. That picture meaning the suspect. So, Commissioner Silveroff mentioned something about a variable angle of view, things like that. Perhaps, I don't know. But the technology is such that what you want to focus on can be focused on. That's what the technology can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes.
Yvonne Michelle Autry, and then we have two final cards, Terry Wilburn and Michael Hunt.
Yes, good morning. I'm Yvonne Michelle Autry. Thank you for another opportunity to address commissioners. You know, I think after coming to these meetings 7 or 8, almost 10 years, I think you all make up your own statistics, and I think you edit your own video for to create public opinion. It's quite obvious. This looks really very good. And again, the officers that are peace officers that serve and protect, again, this comment is not for you, quite obviously. But we've heard testimony over testimony. If it's not from, penis envy and groping the black males, larger genitals, or I've heard testimonies from women that these, women that have, to a cop disrespected me. I don't see that here. I would love to see that. So I think it's selective or it's edited. And this is another reason why you need an oversight committee. I'd also like to state that in other states, again, this is not LAPD, I'm not delusional, and I'm stating this so this does not recreate or reinvent itself here. And I'd like to see videos reflecting, there have been black men, again, they're predominantly black males that have been handcuffed, shot, and then they claim that they've somehow manifested a gun and shot themselves. Why don't we have videos reflecting that truth, which is the testimony of witnesses that disappear or whose testimonies, again, are found unfounded? So why don't we have the videos reflecting the public, the community's complaints, which you continually ignore and as if it's not inexistent? Again, this is not directed towards officers that are serving and protecting, but for people, innocent, predominantly black males, people of color who are attacked, they are profiled, victims of police brutality. Why don't we have videos depicting that, from Rodney King to Tamir Rice or Tamisha Rice, or
next,
for all of the victims that are dead, for Africa as well?
In the pursuit of understanding these cameras concerning aircraft and boats and licensing, if in fact that you have an agreement or a paper and you go into this or forgery papers or altering, what I call, forgery papers, and finding out that in trading instrument, you bruise the system because you have a badge licensing for burglary or transferring on a plane. For example, there has been several in Los Angeles, LAX, that people have came over here from the Atlanta waters. There are pictures that these people have been kidnapped and thrown into a place for their funding. Or Africa pictures, you can show that. They cut up innocent black people in Africa, or whites, presidents, to sign over leases or business, which in fact, do you want to own oil? Or you might have just heard that these licensings or judges who is in a storage place. I talked to him once, then he goes. The federal judge, he goes into the 4th floor. no one doesn't do anything, can't see anything within this court system of cameras.
Thank you, sir.
Goddamn cameras again. I bet Rodney King was glad that he had a camera on him. See, Chief Beck knows that he's glad that he's had a camera on him. Assassinating by a stick, Rodney King. His car was going like what, maybe 100 miles an hour. Goddamn, Rodney King was a Hyundai driving camera, baton beating guy. They beat him so bad he had to go to the hospital. Chief Beck, don't you remember that? They beat Rodney King so bad he had to go to the hospital. And good Lord, there was cameras on that. Because L.A. would have probably killed him if there wasn't no cameras. The beating was so bad, and see, you know how it's true, because Chief Beck is turning to the side. God damn it, he's turning to the side. Chief Beck there. Thank you for them goddamn cameras. 7,000 of them.
We have no other public comment cards on this item.
Move approval of the item. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We're now on public comment period. We have 10 comment cards. We have Mr. Herman, and he's not here. Mr. Juarez, Yvonne Michelle Autry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Michael Hunt, and Wayne Spindler.
Good morning, Police Commissioners.
Morning, sir.
I remember in the 15, January 14, 2014, right? I tell the chief, slow down with the homeless of downtown because their lives are very, very sad. They live within the street, and you are sending the police officer, cold-blood killer, to chasing them. And you are blocking the Constitution of the United States of America because they are people. They are human beings. 1 year later, they kill the guy, homeless man. His name is Africa. So I've been waiting for justice for 26 years and 7 months. Where is the justice? 3 times police brutality on me. And I remember in 1965, Vernon police arrest me, they put me in the handcuffs, they get to sleep, and I get away from the handcuffs with the car. Where is the justice? No justice, no peace. I live in Tijuana, but I'm going to come back because when am I going to get justice? I went to court October 24, and I got to come back in the 13 November 1984 by the Justice Department, and I don't know, and Border Patrol sent me to the desert with my green card in my pocket, and I received letters from Barbara Boxer. They say there is no federal violation. That was and anytime will be attempted murder. And I got a complaint to Sheriff Stu because they put the gun in the face of my daughter, my wife. They take my wife for 4 days to jail. They took 42 food coupons. And when she come back, they only give 7 food coupons. Complaint to Border Patrol, Police, and Sheriff. And where is the justice? No justice, no peace. I live in Tijuana. I'm going to come back. Chief, sorry.
Yvonne Michelle Autry.
Good morning. What I'd like to say is that, first of all, I'd like to speak in defense of Michael Hunt. He's a law-abiding citizen, just like many of my friends who have been harassed by the police and then falsely accused of assault on a police officer. Thank God he's not dead. And again, for these death squads, Aryans, Nazi police officers, whoever, who not only harass him but these others, this must stop. We every week, we continue to complain, whether it's the gentleman that's speaking about the sexual harassment. What are you going to do about this, Chief Beck? I mean, for the record, as a black female, again, this is not directed towards the peace officers. I'd like to see some remedy and some change in implementation of an oversight committee. implementation of a citizen-based oversight committee so that we can review the officers, because there is no justice. You are covering up the violations of the civil rights and murdering, whether it's Africa, Taisha Miller, whether it's Del Garrett and others at all. And for the record, because it's not just black men whose sexuality has been the focus and preoccupation, but black women as well. For the record, we are not seductresses as black women. We are not temptresses, whores, teases, coquettes, pure passion. I have a right to live as a single black woman without being a victim of a witch hunt, sprayed, shot, tortured, victim of illegal, covert, confidential, illegal human experiments, because it's an anomaly to you people, put in the trash and blamed for crimes that you white people still perpetrate against black people because of your preoccupation with our sexuality or lifestyle, which you still to this day do not understand. Again, just for the record, and hopefully you will take this to heart and implement oversight committees.
Next.
Now, you know, it's a goddamn shame when a black man has to get up here in an outfit like that. 10 years later, $500,000 richer, and you guys are still committing the same crime. I get arrested for a $100 ticket, go to jail with a seller's permit saying that I can sell on Venice Beach, and Chief Beck won't even investigate it. Why not? Because I'm African American. Because I too have a dream. I too have a dream, like Dr. King said. Free at last, free at last, free at last. Chief Charlie Beck, you need to step down. You need to get off the pot, because you're making it look bad. Another Chief Daryl Gates. I'm just not an aberration. I'm a fucking 9th Circuit winner. And please appreciate that. My name is Michael Hunt, one in the 9th Circuit, one in the District Court, over this same stuff. Please appreciate that. Follow the law like your guys cannot do, because you're so rude. You're so unprofessional. You don't know what the law is. Brandenburg versus Ohio, and you still turn around. Supreme Court law, and you still act like a white damn fool. Michael Hunt.
Yes, appreciate again the gentleman in the red hood speaking for justice. And it's come to the point where a black man has to come in a red hood to speak to the panel. And the police chief turned his head, looking away. Can't look at it, because he can't face his sins. He was looking at the sin. That red hood wouldn't be on. But he's forced the man to do that. He's forced this to happen. And just innocent things like driving down the 101 on Sunday, and I turn my head to my right, and there's a cop, an LAPD cop, what's he doing? Waiting for somebody to cross over the right line so he can write a fucking ticket. Why is he violating the California Vehicle Code? It states there are no ticket traps. Cops are not supposed to stay standing still for the purpose of writing fines. But you keep doing it. Why? And the sheriff's department keeps doing it. I go to Palmdale, 3 of them standing there, waiting for black people off the 14 freeway to not stop fully at a stop sign that used to be a yield sign that they changed to raise revenue. That's what you've turned cops into. That's why people are pissed, because the most contact they have with the government is with officers. And you've reduced these people to revenue agents. And then they use the money to do what? To fund the graft at Spring Street. That's what you have to stop. Bring the trust back to the department.
Next. Is that it?
The final 5 speakers: Hamid Khan, Tut Hayes, Jerry Dietrich, Terry Wilburn, and Prentice Jenkins.
last 5?
Yes, sir.
No, it's not it. Hi, Hamid Khan with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. Since we've been kind of run through this whole glamorized high-tech day, I just want to remind us of the Pew Research Center research that came out that conducted polling in terms of public trust that exists between law enforcement and communities of color. And based on their findings, they talk about all this technology that is being introduced, that body-worn cameras and other footage could be construed differently depending on the viewer's racial and ethnic background. And Pew Research goes to say that using white and black Americans as its two target groups, Pew found roughly 80% of black respondents stated a great deal remains to be done with regards to achieving racial equality in policing, while 44% of the whites offered the same response. So we've gone through this whole exercise of issues that you've had, and this is the time for public comment. And we continue to come here. But what's missing in this conversation is, number one, that how do body cameras and all of the rest of this technology fits into the larger LAPD architecture of surveillance. Number two, the relationship between police foundations and surveillance vendors. A quid pro quo arrangement between surveillance vendors, police foundation, and the LAPD. Misplaced priorities, LAPD's disproportionate share of the budget. And then profits, that what we are seeing, there's no empirical data that is fueling the push towards this technology. And I think what brings me to this thing is that you just heard a lot of frustration, and then the country and the city of Los Angeles are at a critical juncture, that people are really disillusioned and angry at this facade of what you have set up. We have reached out to you, we've sent you letters, we've requested for a meeting. You have the Inspector General that whose office was created as a result of malfeasance and corruption and conspiracies in violation of the people's constitutional rights, but he remains in his own modus operandi of looking at procedural audits. So I don't know, we don't expect much from him, but I think it's just that superficial reforms as body cameras are not going to do something, particularly in institutions whose flaws are built by design, and that's really the key here, that the flaws are built by design. Thank you.
Mr. Hayes.
The Public Meetings Law, the Brown Act, is very unusual. It indicates that any violation of anything in the Brown Act is a misdemeanor. It also says you may not prohibit, that is, a body like yourself, may not prohibit any criticism of your actions or what you don't do, what you do. You can't prohibit that criticism. But there's never any place on the agenda for criticism. So whenever a person decides to come up and give you the bad mouth, that's where you have to take it. And if you don't, it says it's a violation of the Brown Act and a misdemeanor. Now, one thing the Brown Act also says, when you itemize things 20 words or less will do it. Well, many instances you just say chief's comments, commission comment, whatever. The subject matter really isn't in it. The other items you give under 8, the subject matter is pretty much detailed. You know what you're going to be talking about, what you're going to be considering. But you don't know what's going to be considered by the chief of police other than giving out statistics. So I appreciate the fact that the costumes, the masks, and things like that haven't alarmed you too much, except one person on your dais is showing some response to it. I would recommend that one person not showing a response. I would suggest that simply bear it. Don't respond. But you cannot say a person's not talking on the subject when they're in the midst of criticizing you. If you don't recognize the criticism, that's unfortunate. But each instances when you're being challenged by the city attorney and others on the ideas, I think the purpose is within their proper protection under the Brown Act and criticizing what you do and what you do not do.
Next.
Jerry Dietrich.
And is this the last speaker?
We still have Terry Wilburn and Prentice Jenkins.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Jerry Dietrich, and I wanted to talk about the rape kit info. I was surprised when the LA Times said that we had this backlog of 10 years, and I came out and I spoke. And I was here last week when you had people up and said that your backlog was all caught up. And I'm really pleased by that. But my question to you, Chief Beck, is will that backlog keep? Because every day there'll be more and more cases in that to be analyzed, or whatever the scientists do. But will it keep on going? I realize you're not going to have, like 40 people employed anymore, but as many people as you need to keep that done. I just wanted to mention that I'm pleased that you caught up with it, but I really want it to keep caught up. And last statement is, of course, as part of LAPD Stop Spying Coalition, we do not want the LAPD to have the use of drones.
I don't know what the percentage is that the chief spoke of, the crime, but I believe that the crime rate is going higher. And the pursuits of documents or badges and the illegal use of forces, if you are an officer in one area and doesn't get in permission to attack someone's home, that officer is wrong for attacking. I have an FBI trainer who trains people, my neighbor, that on my ranch, but he wants all the ranches in Palm Springs, as well as the television and theater shows or of children. These officers goes into various homes and attack the children. I don't know the percentage of cocaine, although I may own all the cocaine in the world, okay? And I don't have percentage for me to own, for people to buy for a 6-year-old or buy methamphetamine, similar to the medicine that I use injection, but they go out to various different states to whites to shoot cocaine in their bodies, as well as kidnap these people and bring them here. And I had to Texas, Houston, the launch area of NASA, Florida, okay, various other things that these people are involving themselves in crime.
Next.
The final speaker, Prentice Jenkins.
I'd like to know, folks, panel, if you're actually going to just listen to what I say or if you're going to actually investigate this. This, I'll say it again, this right here is a video of Station 9 hitting my window with their flashlight. Gay firemen who are obsessed with the black man's, with the black man's penis. They're hitting my window. I've got 7 of these. They've done it over a couple dozen times. When I say that there are really crazy people in the fire department, I'm talking about 90% of them. And I suspect you know it. You know you have a problem with post-traumatic stress. You know you have a problem with mental illness in the fire and police department. I've given you these. Have you even looked at them? I put these together for you. Commissioner Soboroff, have you even looked at this? These are other firemen telling you how psychotic firemen are. Other firemen. It's not just me. They're telling you this. I'm saying these actual firemen came to my job and got me fired. I was there 5 years with a stellar record. They got so obsessed with the black man's penis that they had to come to my job, and they got me fired after 5 years. This is not just some joke. The question is, and I know as Commissioner Soboroff stands there stone-faced, I don't want to hear it. Well, guess what? 50 years ago, no one wanted to hear when a white woman brought her 10-year-old white child into the police station and said, priests are molesting my children. No one wanted to believe that. 50 years later, there are 850 priests on that list of molesters. We will find out in 20 years whether I was right or not.
This concludes our public comment period. We do have one comment card for closed session before we recess. We have Mr. Wayne Spindler.
Put the light on it. I said this before, there's nothing wrong with the public seeing item 10A. So we have a couple of people. it's relating to an injury on two cops. What is so secret about a police officer being hurt in the line of duty? Let's talk about it. Now, the boo-boo is the officer-involved shooting. That should be labeled not OIS, but it should be labeled boo-boo, because nothing's going to happen anyway. You're not going to fire these people because they got the Police Protective League. 3 cops on the city council. Do you really think you're going to fire anybody? Ha! Every cop is free to do what he wants or she wants, because this panel here is afraid, scared, and ignorant about a lot of things. So let's have this meeting in the public eye. How is this process done? Will there be discipline? Who makes the decision on the discipline? Is there a review of the discipline? Monetary compensation. Does somebody walk away with a bag of money? Well, on A1, yes, they're going to be paid. And on number A2, you might have these officers being rewarded for the shootings by being paid damages, apparently for an insufficient cause suspension. But you're not going to tell us, because the way you do everything around the Brown Act is to go and pay a filing fee and file a lawsuit, and then it never becomes public. That's the problem.
Thank you. The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item number 10A1 and 10A2 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
Hi, I'm Cindy, and I'm in Little Tokyo, and you're watching Channel 35, Your City, Your Channel.